Good evening and welcome to Preschool Chat hosted by Cincinnati Preschool Promise. I'm so excited because this evening we will be discussing what should my child be eating. And that's very, very important to me just because being a mom and grandma, we have such a hard time getting our children to eat the proper things. And so for this evening, we have one of my favorite people. Oh, by the way, I'm Florence Malone, for you all who don't know, Outreach and Enrollment Manager with Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And as I was saying, this evening we have one of my favorite people, and that is Candice Jones, the professor and program chair for Cincinnati State Community College. She's also, let me say her proper title, make sure I get all the initials, Candice Jones, MED, RD, LD, CDCS, and FAND. And so I know RD stands for registered dietitian, LD stands for licensed dietitian, and the MED and everything. You're gonna have to tell us all about that. But I'm excited to have you here because I know for a fact nobody knows more about nutrition than Miss Candice Jones. I've had the pleasure of attending her classes before and being under her leadership. So I'm very excited about all the information she's going to be giving us with regards to what our children should be eating. So good evening, Candice. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How is everyone doing today?
I am doing great. I believe our staff and our listeners on the line, they are doing great as well. And so Preschool Chat, this is a very informal chat. We just want to know from you, what should our children be eating? Because, with everything going on, it's very hard with regards to making sure they're eating things for their proper growth and development, but also to help their immune system stay healthy. And so we're hoping that you can answer some questions for us. I know you have a presentation, so we're going to give it over to you and we'll come back and ask you questions later about the information that you're presenting to us.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to help out. This is a topic near and dear to me. And I just want to make sure I'm able to move some of my items out of the way so that you can see my presentation. There we go. And so just to help out with some of my, the alphabet after my name, CDCES stands for Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. So my wheelhouse, I love working with individuals that are dealing with weight management, PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, hypothyroidism, endocrine disorders, but of course diabetes. And then FAND just simply means I'm a fellow or hopefully an expert in the area of nutrition and dietetics. I still work at Christ Hospital as needed in the diabetes center, but as Flo mentioned, I am primarily the dietetic program chair of a few programs, and most recently completed my culinary degree, which has greatly helped me better understand how to kind of improve the nutrition of those around me, but especially when we're talking about preschoolers. So just click here. The presentation I hope to provide is specifically kind of gauged towards preschoolers ages 3 to 5 years old. We're going to be looking at their nutrition needs. We're looking at the barriers to preschoolers getting proper nutrition, and then also how to introduce different foods to children, and some parents here and there too. My experience with preschoolers actually starts, and yes, that is me all the way on the left-hand side. I am the youngest, with my mother. My mother actually taught preschool for 30 years, both preschool and then Head Start, depending on what was going on with the government. So With my nieces, I did a lot of cooking with them, and yes, they were very picky eaters. But growing up with both heart disease on both sides of the family, strokes on both sides of the family, and then my spouse's side of the family, it was really important to get that hands-on experience with them using my background, my knowledge background, to start to introduce new foods that can help them overall feel good and have energy. And so when it came to my mini me, being Benjamin, right here you can tell he's trying to say cheese as he's eating a little bit of a soft taco. We have some tomatoes there, a little bit of guacamole, avocado. He's eating chocolate avocado pudding. My sister was a vegan for many years. And then of course, he just screams excitement just like me. So try very much so to be involved in his nutrition as much as possible. But then all of my niece and nephew's nutrition, that has been my physical hands-on experience outside of often visiting my mother in her classes and experiencing how she was able to get kids pre-K age, so again, 4 or 5, to start to experiment with new foods. So with that said, I do want to provide a disclaimer. All pictures that I'm using besides mine, I'm using in a scholarly manner. There's no profit in this, but I just want to show you that there are ways to increase nutrition, good nutrition among our preschoolers. But then also, I want to highlight that when it comes to scope of practice, as I mentioned, my wheelhouse is diabetes, more adult nutrition, but I have a lot of colleagues, and these include graduates of my programs that work in our local school districts that actually focus on preschool and childhood nutrition on a regular basis. Cincinnati Children's also has some great dietetic technicians and registered dietitians that can assist. But if your child is attending a preschool or your school district, I would absolutely, if you have any questions, reach out to them, and you may come in contact with some of my students. So one of the biggest concerns or needs when we're looking at preschoolers is just a variety. And this includes adults. I really want to stress this, is are we eating a variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, and protein that may be animal, but plant protein is perfectly fine too. And then dairy product or fortified soy alternatives, as I mentioned, plant-based sources. The biggest concern that I personally have seen doing a lot of community events that involve children, adolescents, even when I was running tennis camps from ages 3 to 16 in my younger days, what I was seeing were kids packing a lot of sodas or fruit punches, for those of us that are old enough to remember Tang, that was around. And foods high in saturated fat and sodium. And so what is starting to be the trend is seeing 12 and 13-year-olds developing high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and even type 2 diabetes before they're even out of their teens. And so that's what preschool, toddlers, that's where that foundation really begins. And so for those that are familiar with My Plate through the USDA versus those of us that are old enough to remember the 4 food groups, I like this handout, and I did provide it along with some of my slides, because you can use this as a checklist if you wanted to, because your dietitians and dietetic technicians that work in the school systems are using something very similar to it to make sure that those school lunches and breakfasts are meeting the needs of your kids. So again, we're looking at fruits, maybe up to 1.5 cups. And again, half a cup, which is only 4 ounces, like a juice box being a serving of fruit, or bananas are really large now, half a banana being a serving of fruit. When it comes to vegetables, vegetables are probably the hardest group to start to incorporate into a preschool or even an adult's lifestyle or meal plans. So how can we get some chopped vegetables or blended vegetables into some of those recipes so the kids don't notice them, so the adults don't notice them? Whole grains, there are a lot more different opportunities to include more whole grains, but it's just more about portion control, because a slice of bread is a serving versus, so if I had a whole bagel, or if my nephew, who is now 7, eating a whole bagel, which is like 4 slices of bread, he doesn't necessarily need that much. So what could that lead to if he's taking in those extra calories? And then protein needs. And as I mentioned, it does not have to be animal products, but if, again, you like animal products, an easy way to remember one serving of protein is the size of an egg, or a tablespoon, so my thumb, of peanut butter. And then, of course, with dairy, for those that do not have a dairy allergy, when a child is 3 years old or older, I strongly recommend dropping down to low-fat milk. We don't necessarily need what we used to call old school vitamin D milk or whole milk because of the amount of fat. There's still the same amount, actually a little bit more vitamin D, including a little bit more calcium in the lower fat milks. And that's why you see them in the schools, the 1% chocolate milk, the 1% plain milk. But yogurt works out very well. Cheese works out very well. String cheese is always fun for kids and adults. I want to stress that. So this is a nice, what I like to call a checklist of, can I write down foods that my child likes or that my niece or nephew likes, and then try to incorporate them in some type of meal. So when in doubt, because I know that as much as I talk about the servings, I'm what my clients and patients like to call a realist dietitian. Sometimes we just don't like to deal with numbers. So when in doubt, I love portion plates. And before they started to create these portion plates, I just used to use the divider plates. I used to call them picnic plates with some of my clients because they were cheap, they're affordable. You can get them at the dollar store or Dollar General. And it's just about what you're putting in those sections. So if we're looking to the left with the grilled cheese, a couple of cookies, we have a lot of strawberries. This may be a plate where someone is trying to introduce orange bell peppers at first. The middle plate, I love. My niece and nephews have my nieces and nephew have these plates. We're trying to introduce zucchini with a slice of bread, and we have pasta, and even good old Kraft or Kroger mac and cheese has a place for this. I'd probably switch around the portions a little bit, but there's still a way to avoid creating different meals for our kids and still get the right foods, the right portions of foods in. So you can literally find portion plates anywhere you go, whether it's Amazon, some of these are at Walmart. I mean, you can go to Kroger now and even get portion plates. I like the ones with the words, and I'll talk about those a little bit later, versus the ones up at the top right-hand corner where my little bar is here. There we go. Because I like for my nieces and nephew to kind of grasp what goes where. And then once they get comfortable with making sure that they're hitting those areas, to go ahead and we can move to the ones that are plain. But what I also recommend is that adults use these too. So if I'm eating with Ben, if I'm eating with Violet or Anna or Shelby, in our household, we are using the divider plates too. So they don't feel different. They don't feel excluded as a family member, that we're all eating the same. And we'll talk about how we are role models for our children. And, it takes a village to raise kids. So whether back in the day I was babysitting, this is still the same process I would use, but that was before we had these kind of nice divider plates. So this is probably the chart that we see most often, okay? And again, It's breaking up those 5 areas. Dairy can be plant-based, so almond milk, coconut milk, depends on what your family prefers. But again, ideally low fat once they're over the age of or 3 or higher. Physical activity is key. That's how we're able to use the calories that we're taking in with the variety of food. So I thought it best to use some experts that have already created some of these slides to provide those visual. I'm a visual learner. My sister was extremely book smart. She could read books and she got it immediately. I needed visuals. I wish they had come out with PowerPoints when I was younger. But here is a visual of exactly what a breakfast could be. So we're looking at half a cup of Cheerios, or I'm sorry, a cup of Cheerios with half a cup of low-fat milk. Here we have an ounce of Canadian bacon. Maybe this would be like a turkey sausage patty, and then half a cup, which is 4 ounces of 100% fruit juice. Another breakfast, this would be more of a weekend breakfast for my household, would be half a cup of applesauce. That's why I love those little snack pack cups of applesauce, no sugar added, and then we add cinnamon with 1 pancake. And again, the size of this pancake is like the size of an Eggo waffle. It's 4 inches round with 1 egg, get a little protein in there, milk for calcium, a little bit more protein also for that dairy component, vitamin D. A lunch could be half a cup of apples. So it looks like about half of a large apple, a hamburger with a bun, a 4th cup of mashed potatoes. Again, child doesn't need a lot of mashed potatoes. We want to make sure that they're eating those other foods just to balance out that meal. And then mixed vegetables along with that milk or dairy component. And then this is definitely more of what a meal, lunch or dinner I grew up with. Sundays were always the roasted chicken. If you remember the Purdue pop-up timer ones, with rice, because my sister loved rice and I loved broccoli. And then we used to have the Del Monte peaches for a dessert, and then half a cup of milk. For a snack, snacks are actually pretty important to preschoolers. We want them to get those calories in. It's just about what type of snacks we're providing. Growing up, I remember there are a couple of times maybe I grabbed a Pop-Tart as a snack. That's not providing much sustenance other than empty calories, straight sugar. So there's that high. As a kid, I was bouncing off the walls and then I would crash and I'd become moody. If you're a parent and you've seen this before, what kind of snacks maybe have your children been experiencing? And this includes growing up, my mother was a single parent. And so we went to an after school program that would provide cookies or brownies, always with milk. So many of us were bouncing off the walls and then crashing with some negative moods later on, and then maybe not wanting to eat what was for being served for dinner. So I love this combination of fruit for a snack with some type of protein, such as a nut butter, or this is where a string cheese could kick in. I love carrots and a low-fat ranch dip or hummus. Some kids like to eat carrots with nut butters, perfectly fine. And then water or a low-fat beverage for a snack is perfectly fine. Again, we're staying around the 4 ounces. So when I'm looking at barriers to preschoolers getting that proper nutrition, one of the components that, again, I personally experienced growing up, but then also with some of my students, a lot of the students that have gone through my programs are parents, single parents, co-parenting, and time is a big issue. Do I have enough time for meal planning? Do I have enough time to go shopping and spend time reading the food labels in a grocery store? Adjusting habits or lifestyle behaviors to prepare healthier meals, because chances are that may mean I have to adjust some of my food likes and incorporate some of my possible dislikes from my childhood and learn how to make them taste better. And then again, picky eaters, and that's both children and parents. Children are, and I know we've all seen this, they are sponges, not SpongeBob, but sponges. They absorb everything. They remember so much. Benjamin is like a recorder. He can remember whatever I say, so I better follow through on it. And I remember personally growing up not liking lima beans or lima beans was the main one, but not having a good relationship or liking Brussels sprouts because of how they were being prepared. So I remember the frozen box. They were going to be nuked in the microwave, warmed up in the microwave, and then they were soggy. They smelled. I didn't like any of them. Now, as an adult, especially with my cooking background, my better understanding of how to prepare foods, I can make some really tasty Brussels sprouts, and you better believe I know how to make a really good succotash or dish with lima beans. So often when working with picky eaters, we have to think about what our personal food preferences are, and can we introduce foods to both of us, both the parent and the child together. And that's a great way of growing too. Getting that child involved, that engagement, they're more likely to do what you say. Now, but again, work, housework, taking care of my child, tutoring my child or helping them with their assignments, shopping and preparing meals, paying bills, forget about sleep. When it comes to introducing new foods, or when it comes to improving the nutrition of your child, start with baby steps. And I say that to my patients, my clients all the time. I'm not expecting them to learn how to carb count perfectly to manage their diabetes. I'm saying one day out of the week, can you and your child prepare a meal together and see if you both like it? That's it. Baby steps. I don't think I learned how to play tennis, kind of like Serena, and not even close to Venus, because she was better at first. But it took a long time to learn how to play tennis. We have so much more on our plate now. One day, one meal, whatever works for you is the best step to start. And there are some schools, I remember there are a couple of districts that will do like a back to school night, or they'll do a PTA night where there'll be a little bit of cooking involved with kids and parents together. Down the road, I'm trying to work on some programs like that to get parents and kids together, cooking together. But again, I'm not asking you to take 3 hours out of your day to plan out everything. Start with one meal, start with a snack. What can you plan together? What can you prepare together just to start improving the nutrition of both you and your child or children? Cost of healthy food. I'm going to be one of the dietitians to tell you, you do not have to purchase organic foods. I do not purchase organic foods. I like organic foods. I do not purchase organic foods. And that's just my own preference. You can have really good, healthy tasting meals without it saying organic, or without it saying sugar-free. I work with clients that can have an RV renovated by Ralph Lauren. And I work with clients, some of them like my students, that are using the school food pantry. And so it's really important to develop healthy meals on a budget. And so typically that takes a little bit of time. I'm asking 15 to 30 minutes. Just start by planning a couple of meals. It can include fresh or frozen or even canned, no salted add, foods, vegetables. Again, we have a lot of steamable bags nowadays. I have made meal plans, even incorporating healthier options from fast food restaurants. It just comes down to spending a little bit of time, 30 minutes. Okay, so that is one sitcom, whatever it may be, as I'm thinking about SpongeBob, since we're talking about preschoolers right now. Clipping coupons, knowing your grocery store deals plays a big role. I grew up with couponing. I am a big proponent of couponing, and couponing is also how I help stock my students or the college food pantry. You can save a lot of money that way. especially when you're trying to feed more than yourself and one other in the house, especially when I'm thinking about someone that I work with that has to feed 7 mouths. Don't be afraid to clip those coupons. So adjusting habits or lifestyle behaviors to help prepare healthier meals. And when we're dealing with picky eaters, as I mentioned, this can go with both parents and children. I'm a big believer. The reason why I love trying new things, I'm not afraid to try new things, even if I don't like them, is because of growing up the kitchen with my grandmother, my aunt, and my mother. It is great bonding time. And my mom was very brave to taste some of the things that I would make when I was younger, but it also allowed me to feel confident that when I left that house, I could make healthy meals on my own. And isn't that the end game? Can I make healthy meals on my own? And it's also great time away from the television, so that we are more engaged using all of our senses as pertaining to what foods do I taste, what do I smell, what is the mouthfeel of certain foods, well, I don't like the mouthfeel, how can I change this food so it tastes better to me? And it's amazing bonding time. So I started playing around, and this kind of takes me back to where my mother used to make smiley faces out of pancakes. Started playing around with the foods that are hardest to get children to eat, being fruits and vegetables. I love anything dealing with rainbows and fruit. Bananas, berries, cuties, so the little clementines or oranges, pineapple, pears. These are great fruits for preschoolers to enjoy. And you can make fruit skewers with them. I like making pictures on a plate because depending on their age, I may not want them playing around with a skewer or a toothpick. But allowing them to build and be creative, kind of like food Legos, is really cool. Many of you, if you've ever made cupcakes and you have those extra little cupcake or muffin wrappers for that child that doesn't like their food to fit or to touch each other, they want to keep them separate. But then also just to introduce smaller portions of new foods, like especially kiwi, which is very high in vitamin C. It's great for the digestive tract. You can throw in little carrots and then a little something familiar, which is why we have the Ritz crackers or butter crackers here as a snack. So making sure that foods don't touch if they don't want them to touch. But again, finger foods. My sister used to use an empty ice cube tray. And then because it helps with smaller portions. And so Ben and Violet get to kind of pick out what they want, which was absolutely adorable. But again, try combining some fruits and vegetables like this bottom picture with the carrots and the kiwi. And you can serve them as a snack, or you can serve fruit as a dessert. Fruit is wonderful as a dessert. When it comes to vegetables, they're great as snacks. I grew up with a lot of vegetables and dip. This is before the introduction of hummus. Just in the early years in the African-American community, we didn't see a lot of hummus. So low-fat ranch dip was typically the way to go. And I love grape tomatoes. Depending on the age, you may just have to slice them in half. You can take cucumbers, slice them into sticks. You have carrots and sticks. And then if you fill a little cup with the ranch dip, because let's be honest, there are many kids out there and adults that like to use those vegetables as a scoop or as a spoon for the ranch dip. So once they run out of ranch dip or hummus or peanut butter, whatever it may be, then that's it. That's all they get. And that's kind of just the first steps. Actually, last year with West Claremont schools, I had students introduce a black bean and corn salsa, and then a new way of making hummus to the school district. And the students were able just to kind of survey or test out the recipes. And hummus is actually starting to make its way into quite a few Head Start and kindergarten programs. So the more we start to kind of play around with it, and it doesn't have to be served with vegetables. Vegetables is obviously preferred, but you can try it with pita chips. The way we kind of got my nephew Benjamin to start to eat hummus was actually with tortilla chips. He even fell asleep one time when he was eating his hummus and tortilla chips. We have a video. It's absolutely adorable. But then also you can hide vegetables in main dishes. Just don't tell the kids. And anyone else in your family doesn't like the vegetables, don't tell them. Okay. So this is where you can throw some broccoli or even butternut squash into a macaroni and cheese dish, especially butternut squash because it does not have much of a flavor. It absorbs any flavor that you have. Broccoli and cheese, this is kind of like a play on a lot of those commercials. I'm sure you've seen adding cheese to broccoli, but it's just another way of incorporating more nutrition, more vitamins into that macaroni and cheese. I love doing spaghetti with meat sauce. And so using some zoodles, and I actually have a hand vegetable spiler that Benjamin and Violet like to use. And so I'll mix the spiralized zucchini that they made with regular pasta so that they have that taste of the regular pasta along with that vegetable. And then here we use a lot of ground turkey in our household, so with a ground turkey meat sauce. And then lastly, meatloaf. So you can even take peas and carrots. I've even snuck in some spinach, and these are frozen vegetables. I'll take my blender, I'll pulse them so it's more of a puree. I'll mix them in with the meat, add the breadcrumbs, or again, I add a little bit of quick oats too, so we get a little bit more fiber into the meatloaf. And the kids don't notice. I made this big discovery when one Thanksgiving, Benjamin picked out all of the onions and bell peppers, green bell peppers from the cornbread dressing I made. And my sister said, he doesn't like these. I'm like, I'm going to make sure he likes them. He's going to get them in there. So I blended them, adding that chicken stock. I tossed it with the cornbread cubes, and he ate all the dressing. He did not realize that the vegetables he did not like before, he couldn't really see and could not pick out, and he ate it. Yeah, and again, this also works with adults too. So sometimes you just have to hide them. And then once you're getting that intake, and the kids or the family starts to really like these recipes, then you can remove the curtain and show the Wizard of Oz, essentially. So kids have to see you try new foods. That's one of the biggest things that I learned. And I even put my students through this. When we're at a hospital and we're trying different supplements, all the different shakes, all the students, unless they have like a dairy allergy, all the students have to try them because you have to know what you are wanting your patients or clients or residents to try. It goes a long way when they see you physically try something. Again, divider plates work very well. It is just something about foods touching, and then depending on the type of food, its flavor can actually kind of bleed into the next food that can affect a child or even an adult from wanting to eat something. And this just also makes me think about how I do a lot of meal planning and meal prep ahead of time. So for example, I love salmon, but I have a divider meal prep container, and I make sure that my salmon isn't touching actually my broccoli and cauliflower because I don't want my broccoli and cauliflower tasting like salmon in this instant. So again, trying to keep foods separate tends to work very well. And again, all these components that I am mentioning are evidence-based. So trial and error, but as I always like to say, I don't know your child. You know your child better than I will ever know your child. So try these, see what works, see what doesn't. And then that's where one of your biggest resources is actually any dietitian or dietetic technician that's working with your preschool. So this is literally been, I'm not eating it. So what's going to happen? Patience. That's the biggest thing I can say. And this is even with even with adults. Sometimes it takes a long time for a child to accept any type of new food. And again, using the past holidays, Benjamin did not like Brussels sprouts. And for the Christmas Eve dinner, I actually roasted Brussels sprouts and tossed them in a little bit of balsamic vinegar, which in the oven makes them kind of sweet. And he loved them. And even Violet, his sister, who just turned 3, loved them. So I mean, this is things that I'm kind of playing around with, and it's trial and error. It's literally trial and error. So it could take a few months up to a year, and trying to prepare something different to see if they're willing to eat it. Let your child help to prepare a meal. Okay, it doesn't have to be every meal, but wherever you had time, as I mentioned before, because time management, a lot of us don't have much time. Any quick meal, and again, it could be a snack, it could be them packing their lunch, anything can get them excited about trying new foods. It's about their hands-on experience with you to see that it's okay to try it. Try to make sure that if you don't like something while you're tasting it, don't make a face. Or if you are eating something and you truly don't like it, don't spit it out into a napkin. The kids are watching you like sponges. I learned this with an uncooked piece of chicken, which was actually wise. When I was working with my sister one year, they just then will mimic you the rest of the week, and then they're not going to want to eat anything. So I love to say, try to be as willing to eat anything on your plate, and smile, show that you're enjoying whatever you're eating on your plate. Try to make sure that your plate kind of matches them. And then later, once they're done with their meal, you can always go back for seconds. Portions of certain foods really help out, which brings me to letting your child kind of choose how much they want to eat. So when you're introducing a new food, I always say start with a little bit of a portion of everything. So going back to that mac and cheese and the broccoli and the chicken nuggets, if Violet is used to the chicken nuggets and the mac and cheese, I'm going to give her the same, or I'm going to let her take the same amount of mac and cheese and chicken nuggets as she takes of her broccoli. And so we have to eat everything first on that divider plate, and then we can go back for more. But just slowly start to introduce those new foods. So as I mentioned, it takes time, it takes patience, and these final tips. But one of the coolest things that I enjoyed watching when my mother was teaching was at her Head Start, they had a family style of serving. And so it was really cool to see the kids take how much they wanted of each item, but they had to take some from each item. And it was kind of cool because they would watch their friend to see if they were eating it, and then they were willing to eat it or to taste it. So sometimes if there are friends over, if it's occurring at school, if you have other social events, that these kids can see each other eating these new foods, that's another great way of introducing new foods. Let's be honest, sometimes kids just don't want to listen to their parents. They rather listen to a peer or their friend's parent. So this is where I just kind of say, you got to see what works best for you and take it day by day. But other than that, that's my kind of short program. I hope I was able to touch on what the request was, and if there are any questions, I am happy to answer them.
No, you did a wonderful job, and we have a few questions, so I'm very excited. You taught me a couple of things. for me to go back and talk to my daughter about, because I come from the era of I put it on your plate, you eat it.
Yes. And that was also the era of you had to be a member of the Clean Plate Club.
Yes.
And here's the kicker here, and this is the secret when we're talking about the food industry, but also dishware industry, is our plates were about 6 inches, okay, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then the late 70s, they grew to being up to 9 or 10 inches. So when you have that, yes, so when you have that mentality of, hey, any empty space I see on my plate, I have to consume, I have to eat it. Because, I used to hear about the stories that my mother would tell me. My grandmother was the youngest of 16 kids. So, you ate what was on your plate. The trick was our plates have greatly grown in size. So
it's funny you say that, because I was watching a program the other day, and this man, he was talking about his need to diet. And he was saying that, I'm having a really hard time because I was taught to eat everything on my plate. And so I had never really thought about that before, because I come from that era as well. My mom told me, make sure you eat everything on your plate. You couldn't move sometime unless you ate everything on that plate. And so as adults, we go to restaurants and everything and stuff, but our metabolism doesn't work the same now that we're older. We're still with the concept, eat everything on a plate, or even though you may know I shouldn't eat everything on your plate, your body's used to eating, everything on your plate. And so it causes a big issue.
And that's why I love the portion plates, and they come in so many different sizes that, especially if I'm working with a client and they have kids and they're concerned about their kids' weight or their recent weight gain, I say, well, as an adult, I guarantee that plate that you can find for them is going to be 6 inches. That's what we started with. We need that. What is a happy meal? Back in the 50s, 60s, we used to be happy with as adults. And now we have these large, massive burgers and these large serving of fries. And a lot of other countries have maintained those smaller portions. And so it starts with, if you really want to keep it simple, shrink the plate.
Okay.
You use those divider plates to get the variety. And so the suggested meal plan, going back to that checklist, because I think I see Brittany's question there. That's suggested. It should cover the whole day. And again, it's just about variety. For breakfast, can I get my whole grains in? Can I get a little bit of fruit, dairy if I consume dairy? Great. Can I get my veggies in at lunch or at dinner? I definitely hope to get some veggies in as a snack. That's why I grew up with ants on the log, peanut butter, celery, raisins. I was a raisin kid. Loved them.
Yeah, I think the plate thing is very important to remember, because even when we go into the store, so for me, I have a tendency, when I buy paper plates, if I see the small ones, I don't want the small ones. I put them down and I get the large ones, not realizing that, I'm like, oh, who wants to eat off the small ones? That's not enough room for any food. But now that you've said what you've said, I'll be more conscious of it, because in actuality, we don't need that great big plate.
We don't need it. And that's the key component we have to kind of remember. It takes a lot to remember that we are not nearly as active as we were even 10 years ago. So I recently did a presentation last year, last February, that focused on soul food and the history of soul food. And I talked about how when we're talking about a slave's diet, they had to consume 4,000, 5,000 calories, if not a little bit more, because of how much they were working. Are we doing that now? No, not at all. So, when
some of us not even working enough, Candice, to eat 1,500 calories.
Well, and the perfect example is when I'm working at the college campus, I know I'm getting at least 12,000 steps a day. But when I'm working outpatient diabetes, maybe max all day, I'm getting 3,000 steps in. So that level of activity, how many of our jobs are based on sitting down in, phosphorescent lights, so we're not even able to get enough vitamin D for ourselves, versus how many of us are actually outside or moving around, actually using our body, which is why then we would need more calories. That's why we would need more gas in our tanks, is because of how much we're moving. Kids are the exact same way. I was climbing trees, running around, playing sports, but I didn't have iPhones growing up. We still had, for a long time, we didn't even have cell phones or car phones. So, we still had the rotary. And so now we have Kindles, we have screen time. That was never a term before. So especially when it comes to food, make sure that there isn't any screen time going on. The more kids are attached to those food, the more they're willing to eat them.
Because I got a couple of questions here. So when we start talking about vegetables, and like I said, I've taken your class before, is there too much of any one vegetable that we can give a child?
Too much of any one vegetable. I would say how we define vegetables. So potatoes are going to be the main one I'm going to say. I have had someone, they're a vegan, and their diet has been primarily French fries, but still can classify as vegan. So what vegetable, what vitamins, what minerals am I missing? Yes, this happens, as a person in order to function. So it comes down to balance. All foods can fit. It's about how much, how often. As long as we believe that there isn't a terrible or bad food, it's about the portion and how often am I having that portion.